thank you. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I'm just wondering if you had any tips for some of the challenges that you might face when trying to make such a big organisational shift and to get people on board with a new higher purpose, especially when you have people that have maybe been inside an organisation for a very long time and maybe feel that they know everything about it and they do things a certain way.
Yeah.
How do you carry those people? How do you get those people on board? Especially when they're actually often trying to undermine the process.
Yes. Well, I'll give you an example. So we had lots of saboteurs within the DWP. And one of the challenges that we got given was if you were so if you're unemployed and you took a temporary job and then that temporary job didn't move to become a permanent job and you had to go back onto benefits, it took 12 weeks for you to get all your benefits back. So that was a massive disincentive for ever taking a temporary job. And when we looked at it, some of the benefits were owned by DWP, some were owned by HMRC, and some were owned by local authorities. So you had 3 separate organisations who didn't necessarily get on. And our experience was that you found a group, you find somebody in the organisation who is so hacked off with the reality that they're willing to give an experiment a go. And we found Newcastle. And Newcastle had got such a high percentage at that point, I thought it was quite high. And we ran, and we deliberately called it an experiment and not a pilot, because I think there's a mental thing around if it's a pilot, you're trying to prove that it works and it's right. So let's have an experiment with the front line, and we actually had customers involved, and we just ran. And my job and the team's job was to keep the rest of the organisation off their backs while we did this experiment, and just say, right, how low do you think you could get it? Yeah, set a challenge and unleash their creativity, their knowledge, their experience. It took us 6 weeks of work to get it down from 12 weeks to 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, it was wow. That was the start of the challenge, because we then had to go back all the way up that ladder to the senior guys and go, this is what we've achieved over here. And they're like, bloody hell, 12 weeks to 3 days, that's amazing, incredible. Document it, write the process map and roll it out. No, that's not going to work, is it? Because the reason this worked is because we engaged people and they were passionate and they found their solution, and we didn't try and control it from the centre. So what you actually need is to light that fire, let that run, and then spread it and communicate it, and then others get curious and go, ooh, what are they doing? I'm curious about it. And in a sense, yes, you need to document the learning, you need to connect people, you need to be able to join people up. But in a sense, you've got to stop those in your organisation who like to control things from killing any passion out of it. And that's worked in the most cynical organisations. Don't try and convert them to start with. You'll find somewhere, for whatever reason, they're motivated. And what I'll tend to do is look for, you heard of bitching, moaning, BMW sessions, yeah? BMW sessions. Find the place where there's the most bitching, moaning and whining. Because we only bitch, moan and whine about stuff we care about. If we don't care, we're not bothered. So ironically, go and find, and then really get curious about why does this matter to them, and then protect them enough. So we had a saying in my team: proceed until apprehended. And it was amazing because we were a very hierarchical organisation, and a lot of my team were more junior, and so they said, I can't go and do that because that's a senior person. Well, let's proceed until apprehended. And we got loads done because we didn't ask permission. But it's kind of setting it up as an experiment and letting the organisation's own energy kind of to go. And don't worry about the cynics to start with. You might have to deal with them later. Does that answer your question?
That's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask, whether you feel age has an issue here, because I wonder whether, in a lot of conversations I have, I talk about the younger generations wanting a very different approach to their work-life balance and the engagement that they have with their work and the brand of work. And I find myself talking to people of my age who feel that we've gone through it and it was good enough for us, and I wonder whether there's a degree of a challenge in trying to overcome my generation's views that this is the way it should be done. It's sort of like an apprenticeship.
Yes and no, I would say. So my experience of so I'm working in 3 organisations where we've got 4 generations in at the moment, and one of the things is, so what I agree with you is the point about what does work mean. So what's the meaning of work, and therefore what's the meaning of the employee promise and in a sense that they're linking to the brand promise. But again, for me, the work that I find gets over that is the purpose work. So if you can find the thing that, say, the older generation, what has kept them in that organisation, what has been meaningful for them, and what is the passion that they have, and is there a way of connecting that so that helping all different sides to see where the common ground is, and there's usually more common ground than there is difference, and often, ironically, the customer piece, so this is what we found across the civil service and local authority, is you might have conflicting KPIs, you might have conflicting budgets, targets, all that kind of stuff. But actually, usually their higher purpose was that they'd come into public service because they believed in public service. Even the millennials who had, chosen not to go to Goldman Sachs but to, come to local authority. And so finding a way of connecting at that level, and although it might show up differently, because somebody wants to take a sabbatical or somebody, has got a dual career, that doesn't mean they're less committed. So it's an exploration around what some of these terms mean. The other big issue I'm seeing is the whole idea of retention. So this is sort of talent, and is that a lot of our, historically, a lot of our practices have been about retaining people. And so we then think if someone leaves our organisation, there's some sense of disloyalty, or that they've abandoned us, or that they, rather than saying, well, actually we've grown them as far as we can grow them, there wasn't another role right here and now that they're suited. But if we treated them well and they exited well, and we stayed in touch with them, and the NHS has been brilliant at doing this, and has saved taxpayers hundreds of thousands of pounds as a consequence. So they have talent alumni. Yeah? So because the NHS keeps getting chopped up, they put boundaries in different places. The risk is you exit on Friday and you start somewhere else on a Monday with a redundancy package, and they've stopped a lot of that by just really connecting with, what's meaningful and on what's important. So is retention per se important? Is commitment? And having some dialogue around that. I've seen that help. But there is a bit of Schadenfreude in there as well, which is kind of like, it's bloody hard for us. And so why the hell should we make it easy for you? And just get over it. Frankly. Because actually, it might have been hard for you in some ways, but you had final salary pensions, you had security of things, you've been able to buy a house, and so just getting reverse mentoring can really help, just getting people in conversation with each other, rather than the stereotypes, I think.
Kathy, do you have a question?
Right, how do you keep the brand fresh? So you have an idea, have some words. And what I mean by that is to keep it going, to keep it meaningful, so it doesn't just become a word.
So for me, it comes back to the strategic process. So too many organisations now, the strategic process is a very static process, rather than it being a living. Now, social media has helped a lot, because your chief executives and your boards, you try and hide, suddenly get caught out on social media. So for me, it's, do you have a strategic process which has permeable boundaries, which actively invites different voices into that? So be that the consumer, be that your suppliers, be that whatever. And so you're constantly alive to, where are we picking up weak signals that our brand might be stagnating or that we're starting to, and for me it's around, have you got superstitious learning going on inside your organisation? So I worked for a business where we were doing some strategy work and we were looking at where they were in the market, and the most obvious place for them to be with their particular set of products was in India, and they weren't in India, and so I was a bit curious about, why have you not gone into the Indian market? Oh, Karen, you don't understand. We went to India 10 years ago, we lost our shirt, it was a disaster, we nearly crashed the whole company, we can't possibly go back there again. I'm like, okay. So the Indian market hasn't changed at all in the last 10 years.
Okay.
You know, and you in this business haven't matured and learned and grown at all in the last 10 years. And how many of you sitting around this board table were even here 10 years ago? One of them. So there are some myths that build up in organisations, and we make sense to them when we learn stuff and we don't actually examine. So that's for me the foresight, insight, action cycle is, are we going back and really getting curious about what's going on out there about our brand, and are we open to good, bad, the ugly and the indifferent, and just and having a process which allows us to continually explore the boundaries of it. And are there some weak signals that are happening in a part of the world? And so William Gibson said, the future is here, it's just unevenly distributed. So are you spotting the parts of your organisation? So one of the things when I was at Glaxo, Jim, who was our head of R&D, did rigorously every quarter was everybody who had joined in the last quarter, he had lunch with. From competitors at all levels. And what he was curious about was, what have you noticed? And he always did it within their first 3 months. He said, because beyond 3 months, they stopped noticing.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah? And he wants to know, what did you think was weird? And because, you know, he was the head of R&D, it's in prison, but he would open it up. He says, you know, okay, so what was the oddest thing that you encountered here? What have you absolutely, you know, you've been here 3 months, you absolutely haven't understood and still don't understand. And so there was an openness to the conversation, and through that, he would learn, for his part of the organisation, the difference between what was being said and what was actually being experienced. But I think leaders need to stay curious and need to stay open to that and be quite disciplined about it. It's very easy for us all to go back into our comfort zone.
Thank you very much.
Does that help?
Right. Any other questions? Shall we all head to the roof terrace? Yeah, we have drinks and canapes on the roof terrace. So Max and Sean will direct you out there. We can continue discussions over a glass of wine. Sounds like a good plan. Thank you so much, Karen, for your time.